So Suzume was directed by Makoto Shinkai, and it's about this girl named Suzume. She meets a boy her age named Soda, and she learns that he's been closing doors all throughout Japan, and these doors, if they're open, unleashes a monster that covers the entirety of Japan, and it basically causes all these disasters. So she teams up with him to start closing doors all throughout Japan, and that's part of the movie, but I don't want to spoil the rest of the movie. So this was a movie that I had only heard about for the last few weeks. I learned it was coming to my area. It's like, okay, there's another anime movie playing in this area, surprisingly. And I didn't realize that it was directed by Makoto Shinkai, who previously did movies such as Your Name and Weathering with You. It's like, oh, I like those movies. I'll definitely check this one out. And admittedly, I am not a big anime guy. I haven't gotten into it. It's not that I'm against it. I want to try to get into it, but there's just so much anime out there, and there's so many different like styles of anime, different types of anime out there that I'm like, I don't know where to even begin. I tried watching the Miyazaki movies, trying to get into those, but I kind of get sidetracked by all these other movies first. So I decided to watch this one because I knew that I had seen this guy's previous work, and this movie is pretty good for the most part, but I do have some issues with it. The animation's great, the voice acting's great, and admittedly it is pretty powerful, but I have some issues with how the movie kind of plays out. So what works in the movie? The animation is just stunning. It's just full of detail. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And I think it's some of the best animation that he's done. Even with his previous movies like Weathering with You and Your Name had great animation, and the animation here is also spectacular. The voice acting is also pretty good. The actress who voices Suzume, I thought she did a really good job. The actor who voiced Soda, I thought he did a really good job. They had great chemistry with each other throughout the movie. There's another voice actor who voices a cat throughout the movie, and I thought they were funny for what they were trying to do. Some of the other voice actors don't get too much to do, but they do an alright job. And admittedly, the score is very beautiful. It's very haunting. It definitely fits the movie very well. I do think also that Your Name and Weathering with You weren't really that. They were just pretty serious. Suzume is a lot more funny, but like it's funnier on purpose, and also it's not like frequently funny. It's like it's only funny when it's like necessary, and it doesn't really subtract from like the actual message of the movie or the actual tone of the movie. It definitely is a lot more lighthearted, surprisingly, given some of the things that happen in this movie. And I do think the character development is pretty strong in this movie, particularly with Suzume. I thought the how her character progressed in the movie was very fascinating, and admittedly, there are a lot of powerful moments throughout this movie, particularly towards the end of the movie when you realize like what's going on. It's like, okay, this is actually really good, and I'm actually caring about these characters a lot, and I'm actually starting to feel emotional. I might tear up a bit while watching this movie towards the end, and I did feel that way a bit with Your Name while watching it. And I feel like with this movie, there are a few ways you can interpret it, and I feel like when I go back and rewatch this movie at some point, I may get something different out of it than I did the first time, which I don't know if I really felt that way with Weathering with You or Your Name, but I definitely feel like this is one that kind of has many layers to it, and we're only just starting to see it. So, is there anything about this movie that I kind of don't care for? Well, admittedly, the pacing is a bit off at times, particularly like between the second act, like the end of the second act and the beginning of the third act. It kind of does slow down a bit, and I'm like, kind of pick up the pace a bit because this movie is about 2 hours long, and I think this is his longest movie yet. And there are some moments in this movie where, admittedly, I was a bit confused. Now, I won't go into spoilers or anything, but there are some moments where I watched it and I'm like, could you develop this part of the storyline a bit more so we can understand what's going on? No? Okay. You only had 2 hours to explain this, but you won't explain that. Okay. And admittedly, my biggest gripe with this movie, it may sound like a nitpick, but it honestly kind of just annoyed me to the point where it almost made me not like the movie so much. It's definitely very similar to Your Name. It's definitely very similar in style and tone and visually. And I felt like moments where it's like, oh, this is just like Your Name, and this is like from Your Name as well. And I'm like, it doesn't, it's not that it's bad, it's just more, I really just didn't know what to make of it afterwards. Because, like, I read somewhere that Shinkai was not really fully impressed with Your Name. He felt like it was unfinished. And watching this movie, it kind of made me think, is like, were these some of the plot lines that he may have wanted to add into Your Name, but he just couldn't? It made me think, like, is this like a companion piece to that? And I don't know if it's like intentionally like Your Name and Weathering with You, if these movies were like all in a cinematic universe or some kind, which I don't know if I would like that, but it would definitely make a lot of sense. But it kind of just, it was a distraction when I kind of thought to myself, oh, this is very similar to something that happened in his previous work. And it definitely didn't hurt the movie, but it's just more distracting rather than something that I could praise. So overall, I would say Suzume is definitely worth your time, especially if you've seen his previous two works. The animation's great, the voice acting's great, the score is great. It's definitely a lot more funny, but the character development is really good, and there are definitely some really great, powerful sequences throughout this movie. And even though I kind of just didn't care for the pacing at times and some of the underdeveloped plot lines, and particularly the connections to some of his other works, I would still recommend it. I would give Suzume 3 out of 4 stars. See it. So, what's your favorite anime movie? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.